Welcome to the Roy Morgan Weekly Update. Australia concluded its most successful Olympic campaign of all time on the weekend, winning a record 18 gold medals, and our consumer confidence improved. But the gloss did not rub off on the Albanese government this week as local issues came to the fore, like unemployment, and as we've been saying for weeks, the big domestic issue has been the handling of the CFMEU administration. The Coalition are now calling for a Royal Commission to investigate allegations of corruption and potential criminality. And the Albanese government's tepid response to handling the CFMEU issue has clearly led to a loss of support. The latest Roy Morgan survey shows if a federal election were held now, the result would be too close to call, 50-50. The ALP is down 1.5% to 50%, and the Coalition's up 1.5% to 50% on a two-party preferred basis. Either major party would require the support of minor parties and independents to form a minority government. Government confidence, whether people think the country's going in the right direction or the wrong direction, was virtually unchanged this week. 53% of Australians saying the country's going in the wrong direction, with only 31.5% saying the country's heading in the right direction. This means Roy Morgan government confidence is well below the neutral level of 100 at only 78.5. Consumer confidence, the ANZ Roy Morgan consumer confidence was up 2.6 points to 83.9 this week, and its highest four-week average since February. Driving this week's increase was improved confidence about Australians' personal finances, probably after the Reserve Bank left interest rates unchanged. Now, 24% of Australians say they're better off financially than this time a year ago. That's up 3%. And 32% say they expect to be better off financially this time next year. That's also up 2%. The Reserve Bank's decision, combined with our success in Paris, has clearly created positive momentum. Although longer-term consumer confidence has now spent a record 80 weeks, over 18 months, below the level of 85. This week, inflation expectations were unchanged, again at 5.1%. The ANZ Roy Morgan Inflation Expectations Indicator shows Australians expect annual inflation to be 5.1% per annum over the next 2 years. Now to employment and unemployment. There's bad news with the labour force in July. Although over 14 million Australians are now employed, and that's up 375,000 on a year ago, that's really all about population growth. The latest Roy Morgan headline real unemployment figure for July is up 1.8% to 10.1%. Roy Morgan estimates almost 1.6 million Australians are now unemployed, the highest figure so far this year. There's also a continuing high level of underemployment. That's part-time workers wanting more hours. Underemployment is now at 9.7%, up 0.7% in July. So 1.53 million people are underemployed. These overall figures, if you put them together, show total unemployment and underemployment, what we might call workforce underutilisation, was 19.8%. That's 19.8% of the workforce, over 3.1 million people. Now, the figures for July are similar to those for April, 2 months earlier. There was only this short-term boost to part-time employment that was provided by the mid-year sales period in May and June. Now, I'd like to go a bit deeper today into these unemployment figures because in times of economic upheaval, like cost of living crisis, massive interest rates, mortgage stress, uncertainty around property values, and deeply held fears about Australia's productivity, employment is the great protector. Essentially, if you have a job, you'll be fine. If you don't, you're in big trouble. There are several factors impacting the Australian labour force, and the largest is the surging population growth. As we've said throughout the last year, the monthly movements in unemployment are within a broader context of the rapidly increasing population and workforce. So Australia's population, aged 14 plus, largely the working age population, has increased by 687,000 compared to a year ago. It's almost 22.7 million people. And our workforce is now approaching 15.8 million, up 591,000 from a year ago. So on one hand, this means more Australians are employed. As we said earlier, now 14,155,000 Australians are employed, 375,000 more than a year ago, 320,000 more in full-time employment, and 55,000 more in part-time employment. Sounds good. On the other hand, the downside of this surging population is that not everyone joining the workforce is able to find gainful employment. In fact, both unemployment and underemployment have increased by around 250,000 compared to a year ago. More Australians are unemployed. Unemployment's up 216,000 to 1,597,000, almost 1.6 million. And crucially, more Australians are underemployed, an increase of 101,000 to 1.5 million. In total, this means 3.1 million Australians are now either unemployed or underemployed. As we said earlier, 19.8% of the workforce, or 1 in 5 people in the workforce. And finally today, to the latest figures on business confidence. So how are businesses faring and how are they feeling? Remember, Roy Morgan measures business confidence monthly, so we're looking here at the July figures. And in July, business confidence was up 3.6 points to 95.1 after those stage 3 tax cuts and after the tax cuts started hitting consumers' bank accounts and therefore having an effect on business. Roy Morgan interviews around 1,500 businesses each month to gauge their views on their company's prospects, as well as their assessment of the broader Australian economy. Business views about the Australian economy's prospects over the next year and the next 5 years both improved in July, and that's what was driving the overall index. Confidence about the performance of the Australian economy over the next year increased with 49.3% of businesses expecting good times. That's up nearly 4%, while 27.6% expect good times for the economy over the next 5 years. That's up 1.6 points. In addition, now 39% of businesses say the next 12 months is a good time to invest in growing their business, up 2.9%. But despite these positive moves, and they are positive, despite these moves, the index has now been under the neutral level of 100 for 5 straight months. Over the 2 months of June and July, there were 9 industries that had business confidence in positive territory above 100. The most confident? Mining, with business confidence of 139.5. Information, media and telecommunications was also positive, with business confidence on 115. Electricity, gas and water on 113.7. Finance and insurance on 110.9. And education and training on 108. At the other end of the scale, wholesale has the lowest business confidence at only 76.4, well below 100. And they're just below transport, postal and warehousing on 78 and agriculture on 79.3. Confidence in the agricultural industry has been low for a really long time and in negative territory below 100 for nearly 2 years since September 2022. And that's a wrap. Thanks for your interest this week in Roy Morgan's latest results, and I'll be back next week to bring you the most up-to-date readings on consumer confidence, inflation expectations, mortgage stress, and voting intention in Australia. Thanks for listening.